All right. Hey guys, what's up? It's and today I'm just having this commentary about how I've been feeling recently. It's just been a reflective time, I suppose, and I've noticed some patterns with humans and humanity and the difference between their growth or progress next to mine. You know, how with most people and the way they live and the way they operate, nothing fundamentally changes. You know somebody one year and then you talk to them again the next year, and oftentimes not much has changed. You know, I mean, they say people change, and that statement is true to an extent. But when you actually look into it, it's kind of interesting how at the same time, people don't change. And while I'm doing all this research and radically changing my diet and lifestyle to reflect what is optimal and what should be for the human condition, anybody I know changes very little. They're likely living the same way, routines, diet, food, etc., that they had lived their entire life. And it's not based on any sort of thought or research or conclusion, but rather it is entirely based off of happen chance. Whatever they happen to experience growing up is what they end up liking, and they don't really do much to transmute or change that into a better or superior approach or lifestyle. And not only when it comes to diet, but when it comes to clothing, obviously this is the case, and it has been the case for me. Definitely, as I've researched and found out about Merino wool and its superior properties when compared to cotton and especially polyester, the majority of the world doesn't notice anything. And again, mostly will just maintain things that their parents had told them, or sometimes even going against what their parents told them, and never really improving their routines or their lifestyles or their comprehension of this reality. The problem is with the younger generation, we have the opportunity to optimize more than ever before. And then at the same time, we're dealing with the issue of an extreme lack of optimization. And the reason for that is that technology allows the vast branching off of humans and individual conclusions, where we become more distinctly individual than we ever had been. We become a further manifestation of our own individual personalities. And this is creating the potential for greater efficiency, in my case, doing exceptional research and throwing away and trashing my previous iteration and attempting to be reborn and purging the previous emotional attachments and nostalgia for a better image. But for most people, this is too daunting of a task. And you have people where from a child, they're getting used to a system that is wildly inefficient and wildly difficult to maintain. I think in smaller ways, you can see the advent of takeout and restaurants, and that creating a very positive association in people, and how, it wasn't efficient. It never was. Restaurants create a lot of waste, but it was much more sustainable than the present outer extremes of what it takes to make a person happy in this day and age. The needing to have a phone on them at all times. In addition, having the most unique and lavish foods and trends that are more and more costly and pricey and less efficient, more and more diverse. People's urges and impulses to have even tastier and even more of a variety of food than ever before. And it's very, very unsustainable. But that's people's norm and that's people's emotional association. And so they have built those habits, and it's an even further baseline to transmute. It's very difficult to transmute somebody who has lived on a maximalist frequency for them to understand and to purge that. It's a much further cliff to fall off of. And we're having an entire generation now of people where this is the case. And we're going to see problems as a result of that, because people are inevitably going to be in for quite the reckoning when it comes to be the case that in the future a lot of these systems will not be sustainable. And we're seeing the beginning of that collapse. As somebody who has always focused on efficiency, always thought of efficiency, it's very jarring to be growing up and around this society that we're seeing the tail end of the most wasteful and the most extra of any of them. Well, really, I mean, there could have been other points deeper back in history where there was even worse than it is now, but, presumably our modern existence based on recorded history is quite exuberant. And it's very isolating because I feel very alone. I feel very stuck and trapped. I want to have connections with people, and yet so many humans are just so stuck in these addictive cycles where in order to bond and in order to have connection, they have to engage in these things that are just they're not good. They're so deep into an entertainment rabbit hole where I don't think much is going on in their brains. I think that's why I don't have these issues, because within their psyche, it's empty. It may be null or void when it comes to speech or thoughts. And obviously for myself, it's rarely a quiet mind. So there's a lot of inherent entertainment. I don't really need a game to distract or occupy, because there's always something that I consciously think about, if that makes any sense. I don't know. And so that conscious thought allows me to have a great entertainment just out of speech and the engage and the exchange of speech. Whereas for others, it's very difficult to speak and to have things to say. I notice that as a consistent problem. And even with myself, exhausting myself basically to the fullest degree with my show, Car Rides with Schla, constantly putting myself in these 40-minute long recording sessions where there's pressure to speak. Even I am running out of things to say or things to do. But it showcases the potential for the depth of inequality of the human experience, because that is what it is at the end of the day. Is I want to have these deep and thorough experiences, whereas for other people it may not be something that's even conceived, and they may just have to go for the gross joke or the stupid joke to try to give themselves some kind of a brief giggle or a brief joy, even though it's shallow and even though it doesn't necessarily change the fabric of their existence. It's a breath, and it's a pausing to focus on something other than what could presumably be a dark silence. And is that what humans chase? Is this what I even chase in the noise of my conversation? Even though it is at a higher point, is it still a similar poison as to everyone else? Is it a choice? It's difficult to say or difficult to comprehend, but I do get the impression that I'm being overlooked, and it's due to the fact that society is not, they lost the plot. Humans really lost the plot in a very big way, and I suppose I didn't. Suppose I'm still here thinking and wondering what on earth is going on. Everybody else is just blindly operating in a confused state, in a wondering state. Even now, I just noticed the huge lack of organization in life. How you have vehicles making noise, driving around, but then while I'm at the side walking, doesn't really make much sense. The lack of coordination, how there's traffic, and we have technology now to solve this problem, and we don't. Even though it's completely possible, it's either a lack of care, or I guess it's possible nobody thinks about it, but I think it's a lack of care. It's also possible there's a lack of conception of care, where people have such a hard time even handling themselves in their own life, let alone trying to think about other people and broader society. It's a pretty tall order, I guess, because again, even in our own lives, people often are overwhelmed. So how could I expect other people to have that much of a comprehension for the world or for other people? But there's a grave misalignment and grave inefficiencies that I don't really understand why I notice and nobody else does. Seems very strange, and that's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like my patience is very worn. I've existed on this earth for what feels like longer than my age. It feels like far longer. And I've grown up very quickly. And I feel like I've always been held to a higher standard than others and pushed further in these specific ways. And it's very strange, but I really feel like giving up. It doesn't seem like humanity is really doing anything despite the ability to do something. And it's been like this for years, where I felt like this, where I keep trying to have these conversations and raise these points, and just nothing has changed, and the world has gotten worse. And something I just thought of today was wishing I could just rewind just once back to 5 years ago, just to relive it just a little bit again. And how I think that would be an amazing thing, just to re-experience the glory days once more, to have that sense of security, that sense of concreteness. But the world is going to have to change soon. We have to start to realize that property is a very outdated concept, and that humans will eventually need to transcend it. Most problems come from the result of property and its illusion, its false security, its creation of inequality, its creation of envy, and our need to transmute it and see where humanity is going next is of grave importance. But we're seeing a surge in animalistic tendencies of people, and it is not a good situation. Not a good situation in the slightest. But I'll continue to live. I just feel like I want the noise to be drowned out. I feel like I'm speaking to a brick wall all the time, more and more. And the silence that I seek is far different than the silence most people seek. Most people seek a silence from themselves, but I actually seek a voice. I want to hear something, not from myself, but from the world around me, some kind of care, some kind of noticing. And I don't seek to sleep out of the pain of existence. I seek to sleep out of the inadequacy of existence. And I hope for hope. And I hope to start to see some kind of shift or change. But what I do know is this: property is an illusion. Ownership is an illusion. And the fabric of this reality is intertwined in that statement. And what is and what isn't, what's owned and what's not owned, what's found and what's forgotten, the trials a human endures throughout their life, and how most can't handle it out of a low emotional bandwidth. I have trouble with the patience to persist with a high bandwidth that isn't being utilized, and possibly isn't possible to be utilized until technology and AI could mature to the point where maybe I will have a computer or something that will perfect existence. I used to not believe in that, but I have no other hope at this point. I've seen humans and I've seen how badly they failed, and there's simply no other path at this point. It is what it is, and I guess we all just try to do what we all try to do. But it's all very chaotic and disorganized. And I hope for hope, and I hope for progress. But I wonder if technology hasn't helped us yet, how is it logical to hope that more of it will fix things. I hope for hope, and I hope for peace.